Hello and welcome to Newsclick. Today we have with us Professor Ramakrishnan from the School of International Studies in Jawaharlal Nehru University. Professor Ramakrishnan, we are seeing again a large-scale breakout of resistance to the occupation in Palestine. Do you think this signals a third Intifada?
They are almost there because they are pushed to the wall. The peace process was dead and buried for a long period of time, and in October itself we have seen more than 50 people being killed, and 44 of them are Palestinians. And there is increased violence with the Israeli incursion into the Al-Aqsa Mosque, and the new set of violence was initiated by that movement. And therefore the Palestinians are now once more pushed to go to take matters in their own hands. They cannot anymore depend upon the so-called peace process.
So two things over here. The immediate trigger seems to be what's being done in East Jerusalem, and particularly the Al-Aqsa Mosque compound, where it seems there are increasing incursions taking place, stopping of Muslims from going to prayers and so on. So an immediate trigger was that, but the larger issue of what you're raising is really the complete breakdown of the peace process. Is the responsibility of the Palestinian Authority in this respect also there? Because they seem to be taking the issues to United Nations but stopping halfway. They're really not going forward either to press the United Nations, the International Court to take action against violations of international law, criminal court, etc., which are measures they could do because now they have a standing in the United Nations system. Nor are they saying the peace process is over and let Israel take over its occupation, we give up. As Palestinian Authority, we will not continue to play this role. Are these the two options they had, or do you think that either of the options are not really?
I think they have come to realize that this rhetoric of the peace process has not been working, and the Palestinian Authority has been accused of, in a way, assisting Israeli occupation by putting their own police and other agencies which assist the occupational authority in some way or the other, and therefore that route is no more available. And that is precisely the moment when the Palestinians realize that actually nothing is moving on the political front, and therefore one has to have such a movement within the West Bank, and it's coming up. More and more youngsters are joining the protests. It's becoming more or less like the first Intifada, and it can turn more violent now, because if they do not push the boundaries of the normality that is created, that oppressive normality, then there is no other way out.
The near normality, as you talked about, is really slow dispossession of their lands, demolition of their homes, changing the composition of the occupied territories, a slow demographic erosion and so on. And that's particularly focused on East Jerusalem at the moment, which is where the major tension has been building up. Coming to the other issue, unlike the first and second Intifada, where the main occupation forces were really the Israeli police and security forces, this time the settler militias are playing a very important role. In fact, they are the ones who are at the forefront of the attacks on the Palestinians. Do you think this marks a shift in the way the occupation is actually developing?
That's a very significant point, because the settlers are armed with the extreme right-wing government of Netanyahu, and they are pretty sure that whatever they do is ultimately being sanctioned by the Netanyahu government. And one could see that this is not only what's happening within the West Bank among the settlers and settlers attacking the Palestinians and more usurpation of land, etc. What's happening within Israel now, like in the earlier intifadas, the Arab community within Israel, they are citizens of Israel. The Palestinians there are also protesting. We have seen last week at least 20,000 people demonstrating within Israel, and detention of Israeli citizens without any charge, which was usually reserved for people from the West Bank or East Jerusalem or the Gaza Strip. But this time that's happening with the Palestinians within Israel. So you could see that like in the previous intifadas, the Israeli violence has increased, not only through the use of the militias of the settlers, but also Israeli state directly on Israeli citizens.
What is the way immediately forward for the Palestinian movements? Because as it stands, the Palestinian Authority is not willing to come out beyond what it has already done, making sort of formal protests, if you will, but nothing on the ground. It's also interesting that the Israeli authorities are not taking over the Area A, which is what is run by Palestinian Authority, unlike the second Intifada when they took over those areas, because they believe that if they can squeeze out the rest of the population into the area A, then they can take over 60% of the West Bank, and then the rest of it becomes really fragmented Bantustans. In this situation, what is the way out for Palestinian Authority? Is the PA going to, does it have any play, or will it only sort of pay lip service to talks and so on?
I think the Palestinian Authority is divided on it, on these kinds of major issues of how to move forward. They may not say that, but when you talk to people, you get different opinions about it. Mainly because I think the Palestinian Authority, all the leaders with some Palestinian national consciousness, they all agree on the point that the peace process is humbug. It cannot work. But what to do, that is where the actual problem is. And the leadership is such that its legitimacy is totally at stake. Not only because of Hamas, etc., as we have seen in the earlier instances, but this time mostly because of the very history of the Palestinian Authority. And therefore, to have that kind of moral and political leadership given by the current leaders, that is actually not going to work. And this is precisely why the people realize this time that, as you could see, more women fighters are coming out. There is a churning that's going on, and that's why your first question, whether the third Intifada is already there or is coming. The situation is very ripe for that, and the Palestinian Authority may not be interested in that because it's a problem for them. They have to suppress such movements in favor of Israel. So they do not want violence to increase beyond a point. But they, I think, at this moment do not have any option.
But at the same time, they really, as you said, have no option, because if there is no mass protest, they have no leverage with the Israeli government to negotiate anything, because more or less Netanyahu has said, we don't need to talk to you, nobody is bothered about you, we can do what we want, and the international community is washing your hands off you, which is really what the reality is. You can see Government of India making, shall we say, nice with the Israeli government. We had Mr. Modi, who was been talking about his friend Netanyahu and so on. So there is this whole movement of the global order to at least close its eyes to what's happening in Palestine. The all talk about international law, etc., has been given the go-by. In this case, the only solution seems to be movements of the Palestinian people and a kind of BDS campaign in the globe which would support them. It doesn't seem there is any other motor left for moving the Palestinian issue forward. Would you agree with that?
I think the Palestinian movement, and as you correctly said, solidarity with that on not simply in words but in action by the international community is extremely important, and the BDS campaign is picking up in various parts of the world. Not so much in India, which is the government is going along one direction, which is really hurting the Palestinian cause at this moment. And it was, with great sadness and shame that we could see when our president visited Ramallah, we could see Palestinians protesting against an Indian leader for the first time maybe in our history, which is really sad to see that. So if the government has pushed the people of India and Palestine to such a level, with all the history of our mutual kind of solidarity, etc., and Indian support to the Palestinian cause, our campaign for solidarity and the BDS movement has to pick up. There's no other way, because with India there is so much of things at stake for the state of Israel, the military, the technical, the intelligence, all kinds of relationship. If we do not make any inroads into that and break that oppressive kind of situation where the Indian state and the Israeli state are coordinating now, then there is no way out for us to come out of this really ethically demoralizing situation. And we have to really pick up that campaign.
Thank you very much. We'll continue to watch what's happening in West Bank as well as in Israel proper, where also the Palestinians are on the streets, and we'll continue discussing this as the situation develops. Thank you very much.
Thank you.